Everyone ready? Good morning. I'm Josh Shapiro, honored to serve as Pennsylvania's Attorney General, and joined today by Executive Deputy Attorney General Jennifer Selber and Senior Deputy Attorney General Dan Dye. Today, my office charged Father David Poulson, a Roman Catholic priest in the Diocese of Erie for 4 decades, with the repeated sexual assault of a young boy that began when the victim was 8 years old, and sexual offenses against a second boy that began when he was just 15. Among the 14 charges Poulson is facing: indecent assault, endangering the welfare of children, corruption of minors in connection with these terrible crimes. Poulson was arrested this morning at his mother's house in Oil City without incident. He is being taken to Jefferson County Jail by Office of Attorney General agents at this time. Bail was set at $300,000 of cash. These charges follow the presentment of the 40th statewide investigative grand jury, which found that Poulson sexually assaulted these 2 boys while he was employed in active ministry as a priest in the Diocese of Erie. These assaults occurred in church rectories at St. Michael's Catholic Church in Freiburg, Clarion County, and at St. Anthony's of Padua Catholic Church in Cambridge Springs, which is in Crawford County. Additionally, assaults took place in a remote hunting cabin in Jefferson County that Poulson co-owned. Before I provide further details on the case against Poulson, I want to say 2 things. First, I want to thank the grand jurors who heard gut-wrenching testimony over a prolonged period of time from these victims and witnesses and others. They reviewed exhibits and considered evidence, and they ultimately recommended criminal charges in this case. Their presentment, which is being made public today, casts a badly needed light on sexual abuse by a priest of 2 youths in this diocese over the course of many years. Second, I want to say something directly to the victims of sexual abuse in this case, and the victims of sexual abuse anywhere in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We hear you. We are listening, and I believe you. We are taking action against your abusers, and we will hold them fully accountable for their crimes, not just today in Erie, but every day throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Earlier this year, the grand jury reviewed a January 26th memorandum provided to my office by the Diocese of Erie. The memorandum, drafted by a local priest and addressed to Bishop Lawrence Persico, who heads the Diocese of Erie now, recounted a phone call that the priest had that day with an Army chaplain at Fort Hood, Texas. The military chaplain advised that a soldier in Fort Hood had disclosed that he was sexually abused by David Poulson when he was a child. On February 9th, the diocese attorneys interviewed Poulson. Poulson admitted to owning a hunting cabin and land in Jefferson County with a friend. He estimated that he took 20 trips to the cabin, and that half of those trips were with young boys. Poulson admitted that he was attracted to young boys. He provided the names of 6 children that he took to this cabin. Facilitated by increased communication with the Office of Attorney General during the grand jury's investigation, the Diocese of Erie then provided the names of those minors to my office and to our investigators. On February 28th, my agent interviewed the soldier, whom the grand jury identified as victim number 1. The victim is now 23 years old. He told our investigators that he moved with his family to Pennsylvania when he was 7 or 8. The Catholic Church played a major role in his life and in his family's life. His parents believed that the local priest would be a good role model for him. That priest was Poulson. Victim number 1 became close with Poulson, who took him to places, bought him things, and took him camping to the remote cabin in Jefferson County. The cabin was literally off the grid, about a 10-minute drive to reach it by car after turning off the main road. It had no heat, no electricity, and no running water. It was off the grid. That's where Poulson took these little boys. Poulson brought a laptop and DVDs, and they watched horror movies together. It is there that the priest began to groom victim number 1. Poulson began sexually abusing victim number 1 when he was 8 years old, and the assaults continued until he was 16. The abuse involved Poulson fondling victim number 1's genitals and masturbation. On several occasions, victim number 1 was forced to reciprocate this behavior on Poulson. Poulson even made victim number 1 go to confession to confess this sexual abuse to Poulson. He forced him to do this in his capacity as a priest. This was the ultimate betrayal and manipulation by Poulson. He used the tools of his priesthood to further this abuse. Victim number 1 was also sexually assaulted by Poulson at the rectories at St. Michael's Church and St. Anthony's of Padua's Church. The abuse at the rectories happened on Sundays after victim number 1 served as an altar boy during Mass. This happened more than 20 times. This abuse happened regularly between the years of 2002 and 2010. The grand jury also heard testimony from victim number 2, who revealed sexual abuse by Poulson between 2003 and 2006, when he was between the ages of 15 and 18. The two victims did not know each other. Victim number 2 said Poulson took him alone to the hunting cabin several times. He said Poulson put his hand under his shirt and rubbed his stomach and chest and slid his hands down his pants underneath his underwear toward his genitalia. Victim number 2 was able to roll away and avoid further abuse at the hands of Poulson. He froze when it was happening to him, and he worried Poulson would actually be mad or offended if he stopped him. The grand jury heard from 9 other men who had contact with Poulson when they were minors. These men all told similar stories. Poulson was cool, they thought, a young priest who flirted with the boys and wrestled with them. One testified that Poulson joked about his sexual preference for young boys. One of the men spoke of his time as a student at Bradford Central Christian High School when Poulson was a teacher there. Poulson befriended the boys. He took them to chess matches and mentored him spiritually. The chess matches turned into dinners. The dinners soon included alcohol. Poulson gave him gifts and cash. This was classic grooming behavior by a predator priest. There was roughhousing, wrestling, horseplay initiated by Poulson in either the rectory or the church. On at least one occasion, the witness recalled Poulson becoming aroused as they wrestled. We believe that assaults occurred against this boy at the hands of Poulson, but they were outside the statute of limitations for abuse crimes. Under Pennsylvania law at the time of this assault, charges could have only been brought within 2 years of the abuse. The grand jury issued a subpoena to the Diocese of Erie in September 2016, requesting all records related to child sexual abuse perpetuated by priests and religious leaders in the diocese. In response, the grand jury received a confidential memorandum dated May 24th, 2010, an important date to recall. This memo, dated May 24th, 2010, was from the diocese, in which then Bishop Donald Troutman noted complaints had been received regarding Poulson's inappropriate contact with minors. The secret memo included admissions by Poulson himself of being aroused by a boy and sharing sexually suggestive texts with other boys. The memo was written 8 years ago, and it was locked up and hidden in the church's secret archives. They knew about it, and they hid it, and they kept it secret. The memo shows that the diocese knew of Poulson's predatory behaviors at least 8 years ago, and yet they allowed him to continue in active ministry as a priest within the diocese until he resigned as a pastor at St. Anthony's of Padua on February 12, 2018, just a couple of months ago. They knew it, and they knew it for years. They did nothing to stop this abuse. They did nothing throughout those years until very recently to alert law enforcement. They did nothing to alert other parishioners, especially parishioners who had young children. Instead, they let Poulson remain in active ministry. I want to say a word about these victims. The victims are remarkably brave young men who have struggled with trauma of Poulson's abuse for many years. One of these men now serves in our nation's armed forces. He is a hero for his service, but he's also a hero for stepping forward and providing his story to law enforcement. It is no surprise that victims keep this inside for so long. It often takes victims of child sexual abuse decades to come forward. They were attacked by the very person that they were taught to respect and admire. Children are targeted by predators because they are vulnerable. They are young, and they struggle with shame, confusion, and fear. But once a victim finds the courage to come forward, law enforcement has a responsibility to go after the predator, to take action, and to protect those victims. And that's exactly what the Office of Attorney General did here in Erie. And we will not relent in our pursuit of other child predators inside and outside the church. For his crimes, Poulson faces serious felony charges for the sexual abuse of children, and we will hold him accountable. The 37th statewide grand jury investigating clergy sex abuse in the Johnstown-Altoona Diocese called for abolishing the criminal statute of limitations for sex crimes against children. I renew that call again here today in Erie. I believe it is long past time to reform these arbitrary timeframes so that we can seek justice for all of our children. There is no statute of limitations on homicide under Pennsylvania law, and there shouldn't be on child abuse either. I just explained that in this case in the Diocese of Erie, our investigators uncovered additional evidence of other sexual assaults, but the statute of limitations prohibit us from filing those additional charges. These victims, and all victims, are entitled to justice. And the statute of limitations should not be a bar toward receiving that justice. I'm asking the Pennsylvania legislature and Governor Wolf to again abolish this statute of limitations for childhood sexual abuse. We believe there may be other victims at the hands of Father Poulson. He served as a pastor at St. Michael's in Freiburg for 10 years and at St. Anthony's of Padua in Cambridge Springs for 6 years. He also served in many capacities in various locations. We have listed each one of those locations on this board. If there are other victims out there, if anyone is aware of other incidents involving this man, please come forward. If you are a victim, know that we want to hear your truth. We will believe you. We will listen to you. We are committed to protecting all victims of sexual abuse here in Pennsylvania. If anyone has information regarding child sex abuse within the Roman Catholic Church in Pennsylvania, please contact a special Attorney General hotline, the Attorney General's Clergy Abuse Hotline at 1-888-538-8541. 888-538-8541. No one is above the law. We will apply the law without fear or favor. Father Poulson weaponized his faith and used it as a tool to abuse young boys. It is unconscionable to me that the church knew Poulson was a threat to children and allowed him to stay in ministry and to be a threat to other children. Unconscionable. They placed the pecuniary interests of the church, their reputations, and the reputation of the church above the well-being of children within their care. Their collective actions are abhorrent. Last week, my office accepted plea deals from 2 Franciscan friars in Blair County for their criminal liability in covering up the sexual abuse of more than 100 youth by another member of their order. Those defendants are among the first clergy in the United States to be held criminally liable for covering up sexual abuse of children by other clergy. These are the first members of a religious order in Pennsylvania to be sentenced for protecting clergy who abuse children. Last summer, my office arrested another Roman Catholic priest, Father John Sweeney, and charged him with sexually assaulting a 10-year-old boy in Westmoreland County. That case also emanated from the statewide investigative grand jury, and it is still pending. The victims we speak for today were abused by a man who was supposed to protect them. They were abused in sacred places where their families thought they were safe. The time of protecting powerful institutions over vulnerable children is over. Anyone who abuses children in Pennsylvania will have to answer to me, and we will not relent in our pursuit of these predator priests or our pursuit of anyone who preys on young children here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. With that, I would be happy to try and answer your questions.
Was there any consideration from the grand jury to charge some of the higher-ups in the diocese for what you said was a covering up for all these years?
As I said, this is an ongoing investigation, so I'm not going to comment on anything the grand jury may have considered or may consider in the future.
Well, just to follow up on that, is not the grand jury, hasn't it finished its term at this point? So
I'm not going to comment on the workings of the grand jury. Questions?
So basically what happened here is you got onto this once the diocese contacted you in January, correct?
Yes.
All right. And then through the grand jury investigation, previously you had uncovered documents relating to Father Poulson from the subpoena in September of 2016, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Bradford Central Christian? How did that come about?
About the what? I'm sorry.
Bradford Central Christian victim that the statute of limitations have run out on, and how did you find him? Did he come forward, or was it part of the investigation?
Through the course of the investigation, we uncovered that, and again, I think that is, even though charges aren't emanating, I'm sorry, are you talking about victim 2, or you're talking
About the Bradford Central Christian.
victim 2 or the other? Yeah, that we thought it was important to explain what occurred with that young boy, and I think it also further elucidates the broader point. that we should not have a criminal statute of limitations here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So unfortunately, we couldn't charge Poulson with, with crimes involving that victim. But nevertheless, that victim's voice is incredibly important to be heard.
What did the diocese tell your investigators why they didn't turn over this secret memo years earlier or go to law enforcement?
I'm not going to comment on what the diocese said to us during the course of the investigation. I would point out that Bishop Troutman was the leader during this time. Bishop Persico is a new leader, and that this abuse and the cover-up occurred largely during Troutman's tenure.
Do you have any sense of whether Bishop Persico knew about this memo and his tendencies as well?
I think that's a question for Bishop Persico to answer.
What are the maximum penalties for the felonies that Father Poulson is facing?
Well, he is facing some very, very serious charges. He is facing a maximum of 64 years behind bars and a maximum fine of $135,000. We sought a high bail, $300,000, and received that, and that's cash bail.
Cash.
Anything else?
So are there two separate sets of charges filed in Crawford County and in Jefferson County? Is that what we're talking about?
Charges have been consolidated in Jefferson County
in Jefferson
because that's the
County.
location of this cabin.
Okay.
However, charges have been brought on acts in Freiburg and Cambridge Springs as well.
So they'll all be tried in Jefferson County?
That is correct. The cabin it's a very isolated cabin, it's very remote. It was the nexus between the two victims. Both victims were victimized at the cabin.
All right. Let me also thank Kathy Dahlkemper for her hospitality here today, and thank you all very much for your attention to this very important matter.